Greetings and welcome back to another War Academy video. Today I have something pretty special for you guys. If you've ever struggled trying to decide which army to bring to a tournament, or even just which list you have overall that's best, I have a do-it-yourself report card. So make sure you have a pen and paper ready, because I found this report card system to be very helpful in selecting my armies. Also, this report card is definitely missing something. There's no way to make a perfect way to evaluate someone's army. So if you think you know what I'm missing in whatever category, tell me in the comments. I'd love to add your ideas to this report card to make an ultimate Warhammer 40k report card. And I definitely need your help to do it.
You're smart.
So the way I've been doing this for years is to use a system of 1 through 5. And then I'll sometimes give something like a rating of, oh, it's a 2, kind of a 3, it's like a 2.5. You can use a 1 through 10. You can use a school grade letter system if you'd like. Whatever works for you, just fill in the number that you think is best. And when you grade this, try to think of it as you're going to a big event, like all the other armies that you're going to see there. So if you put yourself at a high number, like you're thinking that you're going to beat the majority of the armies. If you're a 4 on melee, then you are most likely going to beat most people in melee, but some will outdo you. So first category is melee power. How likely are you to defeat your enemies in melee? So this is just going to be basically the mid fight. So when you get to the middle, how likely are you going to win that middle fight in melee? And it's a really good thing to know, because melee is more powerful than it's ever been. On the flip side, you have how powerful is your army in the shooting category. So how likely will you outshoot your opponent? Next is primary objective control. So how good are you at stranglehold? Like how well is your army crafted to hold the objectives, which is how you win games.
Hippity hoppity, where the fuck is my property?
Also, how much anti-tank do you have? So if you have a 2.5 on your anti-tank, then that means that you're pretty much even between anti-tank and anti-infantry. You're always going to fall more on one side or the other. This is a good thing to notice, because sometimes you'd be surprised when you think you have a great list, you realize, wow, I actually have not a lot of anti-tank in here. And the flip side with how much anti-infantry do you have? So start with the scale, order these down. You're going to start to find where little holes in your army list can be found. So next category, we have your army composition, starting with how much of your army is vehicles or monsters, mainly those 8+ wounds single entity models that you have. Next is how many are elite infantry, so those powerful squads of 3+ models that all cost 20 25 points or more per model, all the way up to stuff as big as like crisis suits that you can basically change the shape of, get in people's way, and just use it to kill your opponent. But to keep those things alive, how much chaff do you have? Like getting in front of your opponent, blocking those charges, making it so your opponent has to go through those expendable units first, and if they don't need you, there can be just your action monkeys. And then how much support do you have? So this is usually going to be your character units, sometimes elite units, but units that are specifically there to buff other units in your army. So finally in this category, I have how much of your army is MSU. So this means you're spending like minimum squad, minimum equipment. You're not putting any like fancy things on them. You're just running them cheap as you can, and they're still going to get the job done. This is something that in the army composition usually tends to be a lot stronger in 9th than it has been in other editions. So it's good to know how well your army is going to do that, because it usually means you can do well on the trading game. So the next category is about things that are more situational, things that you can still win without, that don't really affect the way that you're playing the army so much as it affects how you interact with your opponent. So first off, how much CP like usage does your army take? If I were to have a bunch of CP, because you use all your CP in one turn, because that's something that's usually good to know ahead of time going into a tournament, is just how CP intensive is your army. And then also, how fast is your army?
I'm fast as fuck, boy.
So just being able to get to the right spot at the right time late game, that can be the final thing that decides who wins and who loses. I've seen multiple games where guardsman unit just moves that's been hiding in a corner for most of the time, so no one ever bothered to shoot at it. It moves, grabs that objective right at the end of the game, and just scores a ton of points and flips the game.
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am.
So next category, we have the shenanigans category. This is my favorite category. So this is how much rules you have that are weird, that have weird interactions with other rules, that just can catch people off guard, really flip a fight in your favor. You know, for example, Kroot are 6 points a model and have 2 attacks, but all of a sudden you pop a little gland thing near them on a shaper, they go to 3 attacks and +1 strength, and then on top of that you use their stratagem to heroically intervene, and now those things have 4 attacks, going from 2 to 4 attacks. I mean, that's 2 Kroot in 1 Kroot, and that's still a 6-point model. That's a shenanigan. So every army has access to different types of shenanigans. Some, we're looking at you Harlequins, have a lot more shenanigans than other factions.
Just remember, Leahy, what comes around is all around.
So this next category is kind of army composition, kind of situational power, but how well and prepared are you for your secondaries? If you have all 3 of your secondaries picked out, you don't even know who you're fighting, that's amazing. But how well are you able to adapt to having to choose a different or a weird secondary, and how well are you at doing these new mission progressive objectives? So things like planting the little bombs and even disarming them, which is a lot harder than you'd think. So finally, score yourself on how your ability to block and stop. So this is your ability to just shut your opponent down, whether that's through secondaries like blocking deep strike, just being able to get in their way, not let your opponent do what he's planning to do to win the game. So next I have a bunch of strengths and weaknesses for your army that you basically just check mark true or false. And for the strengths one, every time you mention true, that's a good thing. Anytime you leave it blank, it's not a problem. It just means that you can't do that thing. So starting off with, do you alpha strike, or do you have a way to alpha strike? This is just how hard can you hit your opponent really, really hard first turn.
Surprise, motherfucker!
If you got 2 flyers and things that ignore line of sight, that's going to be things that can just hit your opponent. There's not much he can do about it. He can't really hide from it. So that would be Alpha Strike, Drop Potting, Iron Hands. They love their Alpha Strike, Raven Guard, that kind of thing. So these are the next 2, and in some cases armies can be both, but usually most players and armies that they build are going to be either really proactive and aggressive or offensive. Others are going to be more defensive and reactive. So in some cases, like for example, you know, transport rush armies, those can be both defensive, reactive, and aggressive. So you can definitely check both these boxes, but most armies are going to lean towards one or the other. So the next one, usually if you answered yes for Alpha Strike, you'll probably answer yes for this one, but not every army that Alpha Strikes is an army that has a lot like line of sight and planes. You can use these very defensively, and you can use these as more covering fire, more like an Orc Squig Buggy type of thing, where you're relying on its constant amount of shooting versus that initial Alpha Strike. So this is one that I've noticed a lot of people don't think about when they made their list and when they actually put it on the table. So how easily can you hide your army? So some things like a little perk of the Ghost Skill, for example, which I don't think is that great of a unit, but the fact that it can't be shot at when it's far away means I don't have to waste one of those precious spots behind the L terrain on hiding it. Also, yeah, people like to take big units of things like, you know, Squig Buggies or even Death Dreads or something. The reason why those are so difficult to use is because they're so hard to hide. The Indominus Space Marine bikes, the Primaris dudes with the swords, like, they are really hard to hide. They take up a lot of room, and you get X amount of room to hide yourself from first turn attacks, and that's why making sure that your army is easy to hide behind a couple pieces of terrain is something you definitely want to think about. Now for this one, do you have anti-psyker abilities, or at least 2 deny? This doesn't mean just, you know, having 1 deny. Like, do you have abilities like Chronos that can literally attack psychers, or things that just make psychers have a worse time than normal? Main reason is how well can you stop things like Interrogate and that one spell that they want to get off, like Jinx or Doom. It's always good to have something like this. Even if you have a 5-up Feel No Pain against Mortal Wounds, I would consider checking this box. Anything that's like that, that's just going to make psychers time more difficult. So next up are the weaknesses, or the flaws. So just like how you wanted check marks in the first one, you do not want check marks in this one. So starting off, how weak or are you weak to anti-infantry attacks? So if someone brought an army of nothing but anti-infantry and just, oh, I left all my anti-tank at home, would that be really bad news for your army? And same with, are you weak to anti-tank? So running a pure vehicle army is awesome, you know, and taking, you can take 9 Wraith Lords now, and that's freaking cool, but it's gonna really be weak to anti-tank attacks. The next up, a really important one, is do you give up a free secondary? So that Wraith Lord army, for example, if you throw a couple other tanks in there, you know, it can easily give up, bring it down. Do you give up, you know, even no prisoners type of thing if you got just too much infantry in your army? The Gene Stealer call a lot of times can give up Assassinate pretty easily just because they have so much of those little characters. So this next category is a little bit hard to explain, but basically is your army considered fragile? And the reason why is, think of it as like in a video game, if you're a fragile army, you're basically like susceptible to critical hits. And that means that like if a Redemptor decides to open up on all your Kroot, there's a good chance a lot of Kroot are going to die here, and it can spike from, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, to everything is dead. And that's just from one model. And anytime you have something that's fragile, the way dice work, you're going to take a lot more damage some games and a lot less damage other games. So you have to be a lot more careful and strategic about how you move everything, which you can't bully or throw your weight around as much in the battle. So being fragile means you have to be a lot more like a SWAT team and precision attacks, which is not usually a good thing. Being defensive is just something that helps a lot in tournaments, especially when you don't know exactly what it is that you're fighting. This one's pretty simple, like if your army has no deny at all. So if you're Necrons without any Gloom Prisms or Tower or something, or Dark Eldar, and you just no deny, that's a bummer. You're probably going to take Interrogate, and they'll probably get 15 points off of you. That's almost like giving up a free secondary.
Asmodee! Our assumptions are confirmed! What? He has a suspicious brother! Is he good to the fore? Make him repent!
So this is a problem I've seen with a lot of people's lists that are more on the lower ends of tournaments, and that's mainly that they're kind of playing an 8th edition list, which in 8th edition it was really good to kill your opponent and be really good at killing your opponent, but not in 9th edition. There's tons of games where my opponent's got a ton of more models left than I do, and I just won due to points. So, I mean, objectives and victory points and secondaries, that's all the stuff that wins games. So killing your opponent, yes, that makes doing those things easier most of the time, but you need to make sure you're better at controlling the board than you are at just obliterating and killing your opponent. That is priority one. If you're clever, you can obviously control the board really well by killing your opponent, but just remember, he's going to be killing you too. So if you only put a couple things to control it, he can just kill those things, and suddenly your army doesn't have a way to score anymore, but you have a ton of things still alive, but that doesn't actually help anybody. And that's where I see a lot of people make a mistake when they're making their lists. So finally is, do you have at least 2 units to hold your backfield objectives? So there's a couple maps that have 2 objectives in your backfield or on your side of the board. So things like the Scouring, you know, being able to control both of those and not having to send something back. So like I just played a game not too long ago with my orcs where I didn't even think about this at that, and I had to send, you know, one of my melee units back, which I did not want to send those boys back to just sit on an objective. If I would have done that, I probably would have given them maybe some guns. But the 2 units to hold your backfield objectives, not just one. That one Space Marine squad is not always enough, and I've seen it bite people in the ass quite a few times. So again, here's the first part of the list, and you just fill out the numbers, write down, make one of these for each one of your army lists that you would consider bringing to a tournament. And I mean, you can add up the numbers together, see how they compare. Main reason I use this is to see exactly where armies are weak and where I can improve it. Where is my weaknesses, so I know what to look out for. That tells me what I'm going to be targeting in a game, how I'm going to be dealing with certain things that I just don't have a way to take down, and just knowing how to play off of my strengths as well. This is I have a whole wall of these in my Warhammer room that I use, and they have people run the gauntlet. So I have my weakest list at the bottom, and then people would defeat the ones at the bottom to move up a row until they got to my best, most powerful list, and then I would give people like $50 gift card or something if they climbed the gauntlet, we called it. It was a fun way that allowed me to play a lot of 40k. But I used these cards on little index cards, and I would hand it to my opponent, and they would choose, like, do you want to fight this, or this? And I think at one time I had like 65 different armies that were all up on that wall that people could choose what to fight. If you beat it, you moved up, but you could now, if you lost, you'd move down, but you could never beat the same army twice because that'd be too easy. But knowing exactly how, this shows you how to beat your army. This shows you how to use your army. I really hope that you guys found this little report card helpful. And if you like these and you want a printer-friendly version of this little army report card, head on over to my Patreon. It'll be linked down below. Just $1, and I give you my little graphs and things that I make for 40K, and they are all things that are designed to just help you play better and make Warhammer 40K a little bit easier, because it is a very difficult game. If you followed along and this, helped you find the weakness in your army or helped you figure out how much stronger your army is at something that maybe you weren't aware of, just leave me a like, leave me a comment. I would love to hear what you guys think I should add to this. That's how I think I can make this little report card a lot better. There's no way you could cover everything in just a report card. I'm just one guy. I know I'm missing things. Tell me in the comments what categories under the 1 through 5 categories or the true and false, what should I add? I want to be able to grade it every single army through this system and make the most powerful army I can to bring to my next tournament. Thanks again for watching. Have a great rest of your day.